So since the last time I recorded something, I actually carried on doing a little more of the same sort of thing I was doing in the last episode. And now I've gotten to the point where I basically just have three JavaScript foreign functions that are left, and everything else has been implemented in PureScript code. Now it's not the most idiomatic PureScript code in the world, but that wasn't the initial goal. The initial goal was to bring stuff over from the foreign module and to start benefiting from using the type system. So today I'd like to try and finish off that job and hopefully get onto a little refactoring. The stage after this will be to start refactoring some of this code once we have it in PureScript. Okay, so the next thing I was going to look at was actually the setup editor with function. And that's called in the setup editor function. That's the only place it's called. The setup editor is called in load from gist and with session. And load from gist is called also in with session. And with session is called in main. Okay, so actually if you look at the case analysis here, it looks like setup editor gets called exactly once. I think this would be a nice thing to refactor eventually, and have, so that we could sort of tidy up some of this this logic. It's sort of turning into a sort of spaghetti code, and make it sort of clearer that these effects are getting run exactly once. But anyway, so if we look at setup editor with, it does a bunch of stuff. Unfortunately, the three functions I have left are actually quite large functions. Okay, so the complication comes from the fact that editor and cleanup actions are these two global variables that actually span a few different functions. So editor gets initialized in setup editor with, and it gets used in this function compile. Okay, and then cleanup actions is similar. So cleanup actions is the set of actions that we want to perform to clean up the state of the editor. They get run in compile, and then they get cleared back to the empty list after compile, and then during compile in an asynchronous action, we're going to push new things into the cleanup actions. So this is obviously very imperative, and I'm hoping that it's something we can try to tidy up once we get to the refactoring stage. But for now, I'm going to just sort of have a look at this code and see if I can find a way to tidy some of this stuff up and bring it over into PureScript. Some of this obviously is probably going to stay in JavaScript, and I might actually move some of it into index.html. Actually, one thing I've been wanting to do as a refactoring is to stop putting things onto the jQuery object as a global and to actually start bringing them in as foreign functions directly. So we could do that now actually. So let's take these out of index.html and move them back into here. So see how these are getting used here. Now hopefully we can bring them off of the jQuery object and just use them like query string. Use them like regular foreign imports. So we can say exports dot get query string, for example. Hold on, let's go back a second. So $.query string is, it's actually just a constant, isn't it? It's not even a function. So we could just say, well, one actually interesting thing to do would be to keep this as a constant and bring it into scope as a string map or something along those lines. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, so we can get rid of get query string. We can come back to this in a little bit. So exports dot query string. Okay, let's go back to the main. And now get query string is obviously not used. So let's find where that's brought into scope. Here it is. Okay, so instead now we'll just bring query string into scope. The problem actually is that this is an effectful thing, isn't it? But it's actually a constant in the JavaScript code, so we're going to have to be a little smarter at this. Well, what we can do is to actually just make it effectful in the style of f. This. I'll call it get query string. So it means this code is going to run a lot more often, but that's okay. We'll go back here, and this is called get query string. It's now it's just a regular f, not an f1, and it's going to return a string map of strings. Okay. And now the implementation of this function obviously will change. So let's make sure we have this in scope. Okay. So now if we have a key that we want to look up, then we can get the query string objects and we can look at the key. Obviously I've got this, maybe I need to flip this function. Let's see. It doesn't seem to be giving me any suggestions. I would have expected to get a look at the function or something like that. Let's see. Oh, of course, I'm using bind, whereas I should be using fmap. Okay. Great. Okay, so that sort of simplified the index file slightly, which is nice. Maybe eventually this is something that we could actually bring into PureScript code. Let's see what this is doing. Maybe we can do that right now. So the first thing it does is it gets the window location search, takes off the question mark at the front, and it splits it on the ampersand character. So obviously this fragment is something that we can do in PureScript. And then it applies this function to it. So if we get the empty string, it returns the empty map. Otherwise, it goes over, it loops over the array. Wait, why would this be a string? This is clearly an array. Oh well. So it loops over the array. It splits on equals. Again, that's something we can do in PureScript easily. It looks to see if, oh, it has to be length 2, that makes sense. And then it looks, it decodes the URI component. Again, that's something we can pull in from the globals module, and does a string replace. That certainly seems like something we could do easily. So actually, let's simplify this. So now get query string is going to just be a function that returns window.location.search. We'll call this get well, I think get query string is probably fine. Let's copy all of this to the clipboard. Okay, go back here. So now instead of returning a map, it's going to just return a string. Okay. Obviously this next function is going to break, but that's fine. Okay, so now we can just implement this. Let's write a function to break up the query string. And then we'll implement this in a second. Here's our old code. Now, break query string, well, let's get this right. So a break query string is going to have this type. So let's implement that. Okay, so we said that the first thing we were going to do is to take off the first character, which we can do with drop. If I bring in, I already have drop in scope. Actually, let's just bring it in qualified and make everything a little more obvious. Where's drop? It is drop. Again, that's the only use. And what was the other one? Length. Let's see. Here's length. Can't see any other usages. Okay, so we're going to drop the first character, and then we're going to split on a pattern. So string.split on wrap. This is a pattern. And then we're going to do the rest. And the rest is taking an array of strings to a string map of strings. Okay, so just like here, what we'll do is loop over the components, performing some steps, and then at the end we're going to just turn this into a map using from foldable. Okay, so now I need to turn a string into a tuple of a string and a string, and that basically corresponds to this body here. Okay, so let's see. We can first of all split again on the equals character, and now we have an array of strings to a tuple of a string and a string. And here, we said that the length had to be 2, so actually this is probably going to return a maybe, and what we're going to need to do is do a cat maybes. Let's see if I have the array module already in scope. I don't, so let's bring that into scope as array, and then we can refer to array.catMaybes. Okay, here we go, and then hopefully the type of rest is going to change. That's right. So here we can say that we want to parse a query term, I suppose. Okay, and the parse query term is going to have this type that's been inferred. Okay, so parse query term can be defined just using regular pattern matching. If it is a key and a value, then we'll return something, and if it's anything else, we'll return nothing. Okay, and then obviously we need to just fix these imports. Obviously the type of this is going to be tuple and string and string. So we look at the code again, and it just keeps the original key, so we can say it's going to be a tuple of a key and a value. Now we need a string here. We need to somehow decode the URI component that is the value. Hopefully this is available. It is. Okay. But before we decode, we need to do a replacing the plus character with a space. And I think actually the variant we need is called replace all. And it's complaining that this needs to be wrapped, I believe, and this also needs to be wrapped. Okay, key was shadowed. I can get rid of this. Where's key? Key is defined here, and it's also defined here. I'm just going to call these K and V to be lazy. This seems worth pulling out. Let's call this replace. Let's just call it spaces. that seems okay. So let's, obviously there's going to be some issues here, but we can at least check that get query string works. Set query parameters is obviously not going to work. Set query string is obviously not going to work because it's going to rely on this global which no longer exists. But we can fix that up in a second. Okay, so let's build what we had. And try reloading. Okay, so a good way to test this would be to type some code in here and then refresh, and hopefully, yeah, okay, so it at least passed the session ID, that's good. And then if I undo this and click on a gist, it should go to the gist. Okay, so there's obviously an issue here. Let's see. Cannot set property session of undefined. Oh, that's in set query string. Okay, so actually we're good. We can probably test this by, let's see, do we have the PS object? We do. Okay, so let's look for main. What was the function called? It was called get query string. Okay, so there's our query string, and if we run PS, oops, oh dear, get query string maybe on gist, for example, then we get this value. Okay, fantastic. If I run something else, then I get nothing. Alright, perfect. Okay, so that seems to make sense. Now let's go back and see if we can implement set query string. The problem here is that we had this this object. So obviously this isn't going to work, and we don't have this global anymore, but what we can actually do is to just get the query string. What we can do is to just export something to set the query parameters. Oops, exports.set query parameters. Okay, takes a parameters object, which is going to be an object, and it's just going to effectively run those things. And then I'm going to get rid of set query parameters. Set query parameters. Let's go back here. So set query string is now obviously no longer exported, but we do have set query parameters. Okay, and this is an f1 that takes a stirmap string and performs some effects. Okay. Now this is going to complain that we don't have set query string, and that's fine. So let's see if we can do that. Where's this used? Let's see. This used with f1.2. Well, we can probably do slightly better than that. So we can change this type to be a little more friendly. Okay, so set query string with a key and a value is going to set the query parameters to be some object after we, we're going to have to break out this functionality into its own function. That's fine. Let's call this get query strings, params maybe? Get query params. This is going to basically have the same type, but it's going to return this map of strings. Let's see, where is it there? So get query params is going to be all of this functionality, and then we can simplify get query string maybe like this. Okay, so f is undefined. Where is f undefined? It's here. So for all f. Okay, so here we're going to get the query params, the current params, and we're going to run some update to insert the value on params before we set it back. Get query params. Oh, okay. So now this has to be a map. That's fine. Set query parameters in f1. That's fine. We can run f1 here. Now update is a function that takes a stirmap to a stirmap. I think if we provide KMP, it should hopefully tell us that we want insert. Okay, so that's good. So let's just drop that in. Something's unhappy. Set query string. Okay, because we tidied up the type a little. So we can actually just drop the run F from 2 here. Okay, I think that's it. Maybe this builds now. Oh, one more. It seems, oh, I missed one right here. Okay, that seems to run. Let's build, and now hopefully everything works, and that's probably worth a commit. Okay, good, so the gist actually loaded, that's great. Now let's try one other, maybe, whoops, let's try thermite, for example. And that seems to work too. Okay, fantastic, so this all seems to be working. And if we get rid of the session ID, we should, okay, great, so we write a session as well. That's great. Okay, so I'll commit that, let's see. Those, implement, this is called set query string, I think it was called get query string, wasn't it? Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's now look at how we can tidy up this setup editor with function. Okay, so one idea is that we could take all the references to editor and actually implement them in index.html as sort of helper functions, and then wrap those in the JavaScript code in the foreign module. So let's look what sort of things we might need. First of all, we have the setup. This can all go in index.html. It's sort of global code, if you like. Let's look for editor. So we get the session. The other thing to look for is the session, actually. I must remember to do that in a second. Okay, so here we have this little piece of code. It gets a marker. We're adding a marker for of type error at a range. Okay, and then we add a gutter decoration. Okay, this seems like the sort of thing that actually both editor and cleanup actions can all be sort of pushed into set functions for dealing with markers and gutter decorations by the looks of things. That's probably a refactoring we can do without bringing any code into PureScript, which is nice. Okay, so that's editor. Let's look for session just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Okay, so there's this change callback that we have to look for, and this is probably some code that we're going to want to run on the PureScript side. So maybe we can provide a hook for that, so that's another little piece. And then every other session, you see reference to session seems to come from the editor itself, which simplifies things somewhat. Okay, so let's start moving this over. We can move these globals into index.html. Move all of this setup functionality, which we already said only happens once, also into index.html. Now, of course, index.html is going to have a reference to the editor and to the session that's going to be available. Let's make a function to set up a change callback for the editor. So we can say function on editor changed. That takes a callback, and that's just going to run. Oops, that's just going to run this little piece of code. Except this is going to be provided in the foreign module. Okay, so now in the foreign module we can just say on editor changed 750. There we go. Okay, great. Backend is used here. Name is used. It looks like it needs to do a little more tidying here. So name is used here. TA name and line. I think these are all constants and they're sort of specific to the view. So actually, it all makes sense to those into the view. Let's see what's called this code, text area, and Haskell. Okay, so that's definitely something we can simplify. Oops. Okay, let's just make sure that backend is not used in here. Okay, it's not. So it's code. Maybe single ticks on the JavaScript side, we may as well keep doing that. The language was ACE mode Haskell, and that's TA name. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. So we can get rid of these three arguments now. Okay. So we obviously have other references to edit, so let's look for those. So here we're adding this markup. So let's try and figure out how much of this code needs to be pulled out into a function. So here we're looping over the errors that we get back from the server. We get each error and we append the error message to the right hand side of the screen. Then we get the columns from the error. We do some tidying up to make sure that the range is at least one character wide. That seems like something that should fit into this function. We push something onto the cleanup actions. Okay. This seems like all of this could be pulled out into a function called add error marker, start column, end column. Just paste that in there. We do need the start line and the end line as well. So let's add those. Let's just copy these from here. That goes there. Okay. Now we can talk about start line being equal to end line. Obviously we can just inline these. Okay. Don't need these anymore. We can put a start line here, and here, and end line. We can, here we have access to the session, that's fine. Here we can talk about start line, and here we can talk about start line. Okay, and then one more thing, we can create a function, clean up markers. And that's going to just run this little bit of cleanup action code right there. So now cleanup actions in the editor is not fully encapsulated. Hopefully we don't have any references to the editor here directly. We're just accessing it via these few functions on the view that are going to own that editor object, which is great. Compile got a little shorter as well, which is nice. Now hopefully this is of the right length that we could rewrite it in PureScript. Let's make sure nothing broke by running pscid. Obviously we didn't change the PureScript code, so we shouldn't have. Let's make a bundle. And test this out. Okay, obviously the editor isn't happy. Maybe I forgot to run a function somewhere. Let's see. Debug this. Let's just step through. So we create the editor. session. Oh, we forgot to add our editor change to callback. That's one problem here. Oh no, I did remember to do that. Let's see, just to make sure. Yes, okay, I did. So let's put a breakpoint in here. We'll put one in clean up markers and one in add error marker as well. Okay, so session is valid. That's good. Milli should be 750. That's good. We're cleaning the markers, but we don't have anything to run. That's good. Okay, so it looks like just the code isn't getting added. The code gets created, gets set. Let's see. We set the value to, oh, I see what's happening here. Okay, so this code needs to be run when, so after the, I see, okay. So that was code that was previously run here, so that needs to be run when the code is actually available. So let's call this setup pace editor. We can run that here. And then in index.html, we can create a function to actually set, well, we can set the mode, that's fine. We can set the content here. So actually, let's call this set editor content. And we'll pass in the text. Let's call it value. So hopefully this is something we can do in PureScript later actually. Let's go back to main.js. It's called set editor content. Let's try that. So now this is quite nice. We're setting up the editor, and doing that basically involves setting the content and listening for changes. Seems quite natural. Just sort of dealing with the editor via these helper functions that encapsulate it. Okay, great, this seems to work now. Let's try a few things. Just seemed to work, that's great. Try another backend, try Thermite for example, that seems to work, fantastic. Change the backend here, that seems to work too. Okay, great. Let's try these as well, fantastic. Okay, so let's commit that. Say that we're encapsulating the editor. Oops. Okay. The next thing I'd like to do is actually to move this function over to PureScript. It's now sort of simple enough and doesn't touch the actual DOM itself. So we can do that easily enough. On the PureScript side, we can just say that this sets up the editor content registers callback for any changes. Okay, so setup editor with is going to be fun1 that takes a backend config. Okay, so the first thing it's going to do is set the editor content to this value. So in order to get that, I need to select that element, and I need to do a get value maybe, and then I need to perform something to get rid of the maybe, and then set the editor content to that value. Now set editor content is obviously something that I need to bring into scope here. That had type string to f, so we'll say it's for all f, fun1, string units. so this is something that needs to be defined in the foreign module. So I think I want to give this a different name, otherwise I'm going to have, well, no, that's okay. One's on exports, one's a global, so that's fine. Let's have that here. So it's part of the view code, so I think it can go with some of these functions. Say exports dot edit content equals function text. It's just going to set the editor content to text, where this is the window, the set editor content on the window global that we just defined. And while we're at it, let's wrap the other ones up too. So we have on editor changed, clean up markers, and add error marker. We can simplify these. 1, 2, 3. Any others? That seems to be it. Oops. Okay. Let's add those as foreign inputs while we're at it. Okay, so on editor changed is going to register a callback for editor change events. Clean up markers is going to clean up any global states associated with any visible error markers. Add error marker is going to add visible error marker at the specified location. Okay, so on editor changed took 2 arguments. Let's space this out a little bit. It took callback, and it takes an integer number of milliseconds, and the callback is an f1 of the same effects, taking a string. Cleanup markers was a function of 0 arguments, so we'll just use f. And add error marker took 4 integers, so let's add those. Okay, we still have this error. So we select the code text area, we get the value, then this seems to have a problem, so let's find out. This takes a maybe string to f. Perhaps I need to parenthesize this, maybe that's the issue. Oh, I need to, no, it's not that. I need to just, out of the way, I need to just do a run f1. Okay, and it's suggesting that I can use fold, which seems like a perfectly good idea, so let's do that. Okay, good, so that's the first step done. The next step is going to be to register callback. So we can say that we want to, we need to run f2, and on editor changed, we want to provide a callback, and we had 750 as the number of milliseconds. Okay. So here we can make an f1, and we'll take the value as an argument. And actually, now that I noticed that this actually doesn't take the value, but we can get it here from the session. We'll have to make sure we do that in here. So on editor change, we'll call the callback with session dot, what's it, get value? Get value. That's right. This is the value, and TA name was, I must select this somewhere. I believe it was code text area. Okay. Something seems wrong here. What did I used to have in here? Let's go back a second. So here I was trying to get the value out of the session, and maybe this is referencing the global, which is obviously not correct. Oh, here we go. That's where I was referencing TA name, I suppose. Let's just make sure. Oh, well, we'll see. Let's try it and find out. Okay, so now I'm going to get the value from the session. Oh, this is, I'm sorry, this is setting, this is actually setting the value, not getting it. Okay, I was confused. Let's go back to the code and see where I went wrong. So this, oh, I see, so we should just be calling it with session.getValue. This makes a lot more sense now. Okay. I see. So this will provide the value from the session. We need to go write it back on to the text area. I see. So we'll do something here. Okay, so this is type F. Okay, so the first thing that we do is we select the code text area again. And this time I'm going to set the value to be the value that we just received. Next we cache the current code. Let's make sure I get the type right here. Yes, that's fine. Oops. And then if auto-compile is checked, I feel like we read this somewhere else as well. So let's get the value of auto-compile by selecting auto-compile and asking if it is, although I don't believe this is actually available. It doesn't look like it is, so I'm going to have to bring this into scope with a foreign import. If we ask if it is checked, then we can say when auto-compile is true, then compile using the backend. This needs a run f1. Okay, some effects missing, so we need console here. And then we just have to implement is, so that's great. Let's just call it is. Oh, we do need to remember to compile outside this event handler as well. There we go. Now we just need to implement is. So that seems like it would go well with the filter function that we defined before. So let's just modify that. Test whether elements match an additional selector. Okay, so we can take a jQuery element and a selector. This looks good. And then where we're using is, whoops, where we're using is, it's on line 67. Where we're using is, we can use run f2. We need to pass in JQ here. Okay, and then in here we can look for filter, and we can modify this implementation like this. Let's do a quick test. Okay, let's do a quick test here. Let's go back to the original page. Oh dear, obviously something's gone wrong. We have an error. Set editor content is not defined. That's in ps.main. Oh, interesting. Okay. Oh, right, because... oh, actually, I'm not sure why that's the case. Let's go back here. Set editor content is right there. Why would that not be defined? Doesn't seem to be defined here either. Oh, I think I need to just do a force refresh. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now if I change this, I did before. Okay, cool. So the timer works. And let's see if we can change auto compile. That seems to do the job as well. Let's change auto compile back. Okay, fantastic. So that seems to work. Let's make a commit.